We know that the planet Saturn has a hexagram, a perfect hexagram at its north pole. What very few people know is that this hexagram has been known about by ancient people for as long as history has been recorded. People who did not have telescopes or the technology to view anything outside of the Earth's atmosphere besides the stars. That is quite the paradox. That's what's been on my mind lately about this subject. It is, number one, absolutely impossible for these people to have viewed Saturn, especially North Pole. Saturn being associated with the black cube, which has direct connection to the hexagon shape, which is a 2D format of the cube, proves to us without a doubt that these people over the centuries from all over the world understood that there was this anomaly at the peak of Saturn. This has led Saturn to be a leading role in astrology and mythology throughout the ages, and even to this day is part of our pop culture. So when you go down the rabbit hole of the Saturn mythology, you get into this Gnosticism, where Saturn is considered a great teacher, but through suffering specifically. It's been associated with the bringer of light, Lucifer, the primordial star, or the original black star is what it was called. It's also been called the black cube. Of course, the cube representing that 2D format of it, the hexagon at the top. And the people who understood that there was a hexagon at the North Pole of Saturn must have been either incredibly sophisticated technologically, which we're told is not so, or were able to somehow, with some extrasensory perception, understand the makeup of Saturn. So if Saturn is here to teach us through suffering, I suppose it's not necessarily an evil force, but there is a price to be paid. The mythology that ties to Gnosticism seems to point in the direction of a sort of demiurge, or in Latin, the demiurgos, which is basically a deity decided to create a universe of its own, therefore creating a flawed reality. Like if you were to create a video game and you get one of the zeros or ones wrong within the coding, the entire game will be flawed. And this is what seems to be, in a way, responsible for our messy physical reality. If this is so, is this something that is objectively real outside of us, or is it something that we project, or could it be a combination of both? Could it be that our reality is indeed a form of a syntax error that is somehow projected by Saturn as a being itself? And if so, does that mean that despite living within this flawed reality, we are still endowed with the divine spark? We seem to have God consciousness within animal bodies. So there seems to be a rift between the animal body and the God consciousness. Going back to the video game metaphor, even though the video game would be flawed, there is still the spark of the original author's purpose within the characters of the game, limited to the five senses, the five physical senses that we perceive reality through, of which we know is very thin compared to the actual spectrum of reality. Could it be that what the Bible described as original sin, synonymous with this idea of living within a flawed reality? But how does that make us living in a form of a school? And if we are indeed part of this flawed reality, that means that anything that is not in alignment with divine source should be wiped clean and start over, maybe from scratch. But however, this hasn't happened as we still live in this reality. How can it be so that if we live in a flawed, messy physical reality that doesn't actually represent true existence, how is it that we have been saved from being wiped clean from this hard drive? And that is where Christ seems to step into the picture. Now, this is quite a bit to unbox, and I realize that, but the evidence is absolutely staggering, whether it be mythological, scientific, or numerical. When you connect the dots, it seems as if there is something very strange and very otherworldly and divine happening. Does that beg the question, now that we have been saved, are we now responsible for transforming our reality into heaven, paradise? What can mathematics and astrology and religion and science tie together with this particular shape? This is Metatron's cube. As you can see, it is a hexagram, just like we have at the North Pole of Saturn. You can see that it can be viewed as a cube at the correct angle. That's why it's called Metatron's cube, a two-dimensional form of a cube. Thus, Saturn, throughout the ages, being called the black cube. So let's start off by talking about Saturn itself. We know that Saturn is in position 6 in according to the source of our solar system being the sun, and Earth is in position of 3. We just recently rid ourselves of Pluto, which comes in at 9. It also has been discovered that Pluto actually does have a magnetic field despite its size, technically making it a planet, but I mean, how many times do we want to go back and forth with that? But that 3, 6, and 9, those numbers are interesting. Anyone who is a fan of Nikola Tesla, the Holy Trinity, or sacred geometry understands that divinity seems to have ties with those 3 numbers in a very deep way. The connection between Saturn and the hexagonal black cube was not taken seriously by our modern age until 1981, when a scientific breakthrough changed everything. The Voyager sent back sharp images of this anomaly at the North Pole of Saturn, confusing scientists and astronomers all over the world. They scrambled for explanations as to how this could happen on a dead planet. Something that is obviously not sentient, right? Things that are not alive. Bees create hexagons. We create hexagons, but of science, maybe turn to theology, religion, Hermeticism, and mythology to better understand what's happening here. Is Saturn sentient? Is there a possibility that as above, so below, just like the bacteria in our gut is alive, what if we are the bacteria within the gut of our solar system? And Saturn is somehow responsible for our physical reality, that being our 5 senses. It seems as if the tetrahedron, the triangle, and of course the cube represent sentience. For the first time, we have this evidence of sentience being performed by a so-called dead planet. I would be the first one to admit I would love to subscribe to a theory that these ancient people had technology to see the hexagon on top of Saturn. Maybe those from Atlantis, or civilizations before that. Perhaps civilizations of intelligent human beings, or even non-human intelligence, we don't fucking say that, is somehow able to see these things, and through cataclysms like the Younger Dryas, wiped out and start over. But I can't put any physical evidence on it. All we know for sure is that they did know that Saturn had this cube involved with it. Perhaps they looked within. Is it a form of meditation? We can only speculate as to how Saturn has been called the black cube for thousands of years. We have to keep in mind throughout this entire thing that our ancients spoke in the language of symbols. You can go ahead and throw that away. You can make noise. What are you doing? Don't. All right, well, you can.
I wanted to see me right off the bat.
Yeah, with no shirt on? All right, you can at least get dressed first. They spoke in a language of symbols. We know that language is limited. You can throw it away. It's a game of telephone. When language moves from person to person, culture to culture, it changes. It doesn't stay uniform. Symbology does, mathematics does. There are concrete ways of communicating from generation to generation. Can this anomaly on Saturn tie together religion and science, finally, to be able to admit that we don't know what's going on in the universe? Our 5 senses are limited. Our language sucks. All language sucks. Language was invented to explain the reality that we live in. So we can't possibly use language to explain things that are outside of our 5 senses. So we use symbols.
That's right.
And Emery knows that's what the pyramids are for. We have to get rid of our own bias about what's happening here. We can't blame aliens every time we find something that is unexplainable.
Yeah.
Words don't work, symbols do. We don't necessarily see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So let us explore this idea of the black cube in the first place. We know that the cube in a lot of mythologies represents the limitations of the human body, whereas the circle or the sphere seems to represent the subtle energies of the divine. We know that within a macrocosm, spheres form naturally due to gravity, whereas the carbon atom, of which we are all made of, seems to take on a strange configuration of cubes and hexagrams. How is that possible? If the cube represents the limitation of the human body, that is the ox that is to be tamed within Zen mythology, how can we be taught to transcend this animal form into our subtle divine natures? The answer to that question, unfortunately, is suffering. And that's where things start to get a bit dark, because we don't learn without suffering. In fact, suffering is the catalyst of all invention and technology. We essentially chase comfort. To live in this animal body, we are subject to desires. We need air, food, and water. It's literally painful to exist in physical reality. If you think about physical reality in the case of the Gnostic view of the demiurge having created it, syntax error, it would almost seem as if it was an accident, or at least if on purpose. What if it is some form of school? Use that error to create a school for flawed beings such as ourselves who are born in original sin. Otherwise, we might have been wiped clean by the primordial first cause. There's no way of proving that the primordial first cause is that of good. We invented good and bad. That's us. What if evil doesn't exist? What if good doesn't exist? What if it's up to us to take over from here within this flawed video game, simulation, whatever you want to call it, in order to bring the syntax error of these mathematics back into harmony with the Tao, the primordial first cause, God, if you will. Oh, he's got a grip. This should be a video about serpents. Have you ever noticed what the construct of a carbon atom is? It is 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. Man, when this thing's 8 feet long, it's gonna be a little bit more of a challenge. This 666 combination is what drives a reaction of chemical elements into our DNA sequences that become the building blocks of living, breathing form. Perhaps, like the Bible has stated, we are truly born in original sin. It seems to be a form of divine nature, consciousness, congealing itself into physical form. But is physical form a mistake? Oh shit, he's got the cable too now. Okay, cool. All right. This is gonna turn into a 45-minute video. If we turn that hexagon of the 3 6s back on its side where it can be placed firmly on the ground, it is a cube. What happens when we unfold it? We talked about the sacrifice of Christ. Anyone who in grade school create a cube out of paper knows that it starts with a cross. This makes me wonder about the symbology of the cross in the first place. If we know that Jesus entered our reality to save us from the flaw, wouldn't it make sense that to share that message to the future generations, we would create what I call an allegory? Well, what everybody calls an allegory. A euphemism, a metaphor. He left his body on the cross, black cube, and transcended his animal form, leaving it behind on the cross. His spiritual nature was no longer bound to the material world and free from the limitations of the black cube. Not that he ever was in the first place, by the way. He had transcended that shit in this reality, which maybe should be our goal. Christ was crucified between 2 thieves. This is interesting. Nothing in the symbology of the Bible is on accident, by the way. What happens if we unite these opposites? How would we perceive reality if instead of bouncing back and forth between these 2 thieves, the hemispheres of the brain, we have a total synchronization of the opposing forces to unite the opposites of the cross? As Carl Jung would put it, to unite the opposing forces of the opposites. To hold the tension of the poles. Christ ascended the cross upwardly. This is adjacent from the cross section of the T, which is left and right, black and white, opposites. You understand the 2 thieves now, right? One was innocent, one was guilty. Could it be that the right hemisphere of the brain was innocent? Could that be the message that they're trying to send us all these years later? Was a man named Jesus literally crucified and humiliated for teaching human beings about peace and love? Or are we looking at an allegory that's been passed down through the generations in the form of symbols, just like the pyramids, in order to teach us something that can't be expressed with literal words? This idea of the tetrahedron, the Holy Trinity, the 3, 6, and 9s, the 666, and the black cube, exists in every culture, in every bit of time throughout history, and very often is tied to the planet Saturn. I'm not particularly into astrology myself, mostly because of the way that it's been generalized. It's become a sales pitch, like a fucking strip mall. But the original astrology wasn't quite like that. Gravity affects things. We know for a fact that when there's a full moon, people act differently. It controls the tides. The moon moves water. Our bodies are 70% water. How is it possible to deny that we're not affected by gravity? We can't see gravity with our own eyes, but we know it's there. It's literally holding us together. Saturn has gravity, an immense, incredible amount of gravity. To think that Saturn doesn't have an influence of human nature and behavior is ridiculous based on gravity alone. Based on science alone, you don't need mythology for that. So if we could admit that, even scientifically, is it strange to wonder if Saturn is somehow responsible for our limited view of reality constricted to the 5 senses? Could it be that we are of spiritual nature, and to make our souls learn, evolve, we have placed ourselves within these animal bodies, subject to the cruelty in order to face problems that a spirit that does not need food, water, and air, or desires would need in order to teach our souls empathy, understanding, limitations? And can spirit, the subtle energies of spirit, pierce into this physical syntax error that we live in, and through creativity cause us to expand our consciousness and thus rejoin with that primordial first cause that must exist before matter exists? As we know from previous videos, you can't have matter without consciousness. Matter doesn't exist. Consciousness does. Matter comes from consciousness, which makes it less weird that shit like this exists in front of our eyes on planets. The Gnostic Sophia wanted to create a reality of her own, but it didn't have the purity of consciousness to do it right. Imagine an intern who began taking over for someone making a video game. There would be problems. But the spark, the mathematics of that original author would still exist within the video game despite how messy it gets. Could our jobs be to realign with that? And if we are an accident, what if Christ saved us because he didn't find it fair for his father's sons and daughters to be erased because they are a syntax error? We are recognized for our spiritual nature. If we can overcome the animal body, we can ascend. A lot of you watching this have probably seen the popular animated TV show Rick and Morty. A mad scientist named Rick decided to invent a machine to serve him butter. When the machine became sentient and realized that its entire sole purpose was to serve butter, it went into a depressive state. This is a good way to understand that Gnostic cruelty of physical existence. Rick's battery on his car, or fucking something like that. I'm gonna get the details of this episode wrong, but it's the gist. The battery on his car quit working, so he had to shrink himself down into a macrocosmic level to go into the battery. There was an entire civilization of living physical entities whose efforts and energy is actually what powered Rick's car. Rick pleaded with Morty and said, "Do not tell these people that their sole purpose is to power my car. It would create chaos." The living entities, the conscious beings within this reality, wouldn't be able to handle the brutal reality of their existence being for the sole purpose to power some dirtbag's fucking car. It would cause mass suicide. When Rick goes down there as an avatar, he's considered a god. This is obviously funny and humorous to watch for us because we know that that's a TV show and we don't have to worry about that. We live in objective reality, right? There's no way that we are a power source for an evil entity. It can't be. That certainty that we are not a food source for a higher creature that could be, in a way, malicious is hubris. It's ego. We think we're the top of the food chain, and when we find out that we're not, we freak the fuck out. What would happen if our species was to realize that we were a sort of a farm, a sort of an experiment, maybe even bacteria in a petri dish, or powering somebody else's world of a magnitude that we can't even imagine? If that's the case, how could we be controlled? Let us consider for a moment how high fleas can jump. Compared to their body size, it's like one of us jumping over a building in downtown New York. However, if you put a group of fleas into a jar for 3 days, the lid, therefore, limiting their incredible ability to jump, something very unexpected happens. These fleas, despite being fully capable of jumping great distances out of the jar, simply do not anymore after 3 days. They will faithfully stay inside the jar with the lid removed. And then something far more strange happens. This shit is where it gets scary. When the fleas reproduce, the offspring of those particular fleas also ignore or are ignorant to the ability to jump any higher than the lid of that jar was set for its parents. This is startling as all fuck. Fleas, just like us, are made out of carbon. We just learned that carbon is, in its raw form, the 666. We are fleas. We're living, we're breathing, sentient to a particular degree, and we can be controlled. We can be brainwashed, and we can be tricked. What if one of those fleas in the jar was to wake up and say, guys, we can jump fucking way higher than this. We can jump out of the jar. We can be free. Would the fleas consider him to be a heretic, a crazy person, a genius maybe? If he was to jump out of the jar, would they consider that a miracle? Can we handle the fact that we are the fleas and Christ realized that we are being limited to these 5 senses and wanted to liberate us from our programming? The carbon atom, the black cube, Saturn, 666. Our non-Christian viewers might say, what about Krishna? What about the Buddha, Quetzalcoatl? These teachers of mankind, Lao Tzu, for example, who have woken up and they've expressed themselves to other human beings. Us, as those fleas who can't jump out of the jar, oftentimes assassinate those who show us how powerful we are. Because to be that powerful, we have to use love and understanding in the same way that the bacteria in our gut has to break down proteins, get along with the amino acids in order to create DNA. All of the portions of our body, which is essentially a place, all of these atoms, molecules, DNA, organs, etc., have to get along and live in harmony for us to thrive. If they don't live in harmony, it becomes cancer. That's science. That's not theology. That's in our body right now. Imagine, like the Kabbalah says, we are meant to create one uniform creature and have it realize bliss. To serve man is to serve God, just as the bacteria in our guts to serve the amino acids that create DNA. That camaraderie, that love, that attention to detail is what makes the human body thrive. If we are living in a God as part of it, then indeed to serve man is to serve God. To serve each other is to serve God. The only thing holding us back is the frequency that has been endowed upon us by. But why would something oppose our growth spiritually? It is said that there are these beings called archons that were created out of the syntax error. They feast and use as sustenance our energy, like Rick's battery. The more pain that we go through and the more hatred that we expel towards our fellow man, the more that cancer can grow. Cancer within us depends on the discamaraderie of our physical nature to thrive, thus killing us. If we don't get along, we become cancer to the earth. The earth becomes cancer to the solar system.
Mark Rober, if you're watching this, that you probably aren't,
Called out.
don't care what the police say, sell glitter bombs.
Yeah.
We subscribe to your Tinker Crate, Mark Rober. Do not ever send us a glitter bomb.